that doesn't stick isn't really growth. You're just spending dollars, we've seen in the data that installs don't necessarily equal engagement. And then engagement also doesn't necessarily equal good retention. The key here is the transparency. And marketers have to be very focused on and clear with telling their users why are we collecting this data, how it benefits them, and then of course what control they have. And that's where this value contract comes in, because at the end of the day, it's also about trust.
We are diving into a special series, another episode of the 2026 Full App Funnel Growth Series powered by Aarki. And as I said, a special edition of MobileGroove, where we unpack how marketers are connecting the dots across the funnel to drive real and measurable results. And why? Because that is what is top of mind in the year ahead. So in this series, we explore the new playbook that you can download, of course, and look into it, because it's going to tell you about how to achieve high performance in a privacy-first world, and importantly, looking at the companies that are writing this new playbook as well. And we're joined by some of the companies, some of the marketers in this series. And today, someone who's bringing, I like this actually, clarity and calm. That's what we need at this point, right? It's feeling so hectic, but no, there is clarity and calm, and bringing that to the complex area in marketing measurement. So we have Nicoline Strøm-Jensen. She's engineering operations manager at Adjust, where she bridges product, commercial, and engineering teams to help marketers turn complex systems into clear strategies. And she does it really well because 11 years of experience in ad tech. And she is also recognized on the Business of Apps, one of our favorite publications, as a top 100 app leader. She's become known for making, as I said, the complicated actionable, and the technical making that relatable. So I call you out for clarity and calm, I have to say, Nicolina, because we have chatted in prep, and it's important to have this type of mindset. I'd like to start with understanding how our listeners, marketers listening into the show, how they can stay as grounded as you.
I mean, in my 11 years, there's so many different roller coasters. There's so many different players in the space, and we're all kind of having to work in tandem with each other. I've become a bit accustomed to the roller coasters, and the reality the change is on around the corner at every moment, coming from every direction. And, I don't think that 2026 will be any different. My mantra has always been to try not to get caught up in headlines and, what splashy thing is coming out from all of the different directions. You want to stay informed, but I think what I try to do is stay informed but curious. And then also to lean on the collective knowledge of your colleagues and partners, in many areas over the number of years that I've been in the industry. That has helped me stay grounded, because, you might read that first blurb of, oh no, Apple's going to do this, and you want to freak out. But then
you chat with the people doing it, because that's exactly. Just it. They are the practitioners. They are the ones doing it. First of all, your data that is also in the playbook, it shows that the global app economy is growing in ways that really matter. So why was it important in the first place to shift the focus from scale? It was always about the numbers. And now we're like, yeah, we're about the numbers, but we're also about profitable growth. What happened to shift your focus to that?
It's important to shift focus a bit from scale to sustainability, because growth that doesn't stick isn't really growth. You're just spending dollars. And, at Adjust, we've seen in the data that installs don't necessarily equal engagement. And then engagement also doesn't necessarily equal good retention. As global installs fluctuate slightly, I think we saw like a 4% year over year decline from 2024 to 2025. The positive we saw was that session volumes stayed steady. And so hopefully that indicates that marketers have also embraced a little bit of this shift from just scaling, but that you want to sustain, and that they're learning to buy better and not just more. And that sustainable growth is going to be that combination across the funnel, or the lifetime of the user, and that will bring the return on investment more strongly.
And it is the time where, as you said, you're looking at sessions as a metric, but overall, when you get to a period like this, you start to blend the numbers and come up with a new way to measure what we're looking at. And that's a little bit of what I'm seeing in the Adjust Growth Score, because it is indeed, you have to have installs. You have to start somewhere. You have to have an audience. But then it's about cost efficiency, engagement, retention. Tell me how you are defining what growth is.
Yeah. So the growth score, we shifted it to hone in a little bit more on what does healthy growth look like. So it's kind of what we're discussing. It's beyond just the installs, or even the original vantage point of cost efficiency, which was based just on installs, getting a good deal on that. So the score is 40% installs, 20% cost efficiency, 20% engagement, and 20% retention. And that important shift is with the engagement and retention. And so apps can't just top the charts by having cheap installs anymore. You have to prove that users stay, users are engaged, and that they're going to bring you that long-term value. We've even seen this play out a bit in regions like India and Indonesia. They're great examples of where our data has shown that though those markets have a significant increase in installs and that volume, they're also leading in retention and engagement. So they're putting in that effort to show that long-term stickiness. In our growth index, we have India ranked number one, because it's not just about the size, it's about that quality of growth. What does that healthy growth look like? And keeping those engaged users.
It's fascinating with the size of the market, but also the appetite for apps. This is about healthy growth. This is about loyalty to apps in a market where we have app saturation, and so overall, just to be looking at measuring it differently, I think that speaks for something in the industry. We're talking about healthy growth. Who would have done that a few years back? It was just about UA-led growth.
We have so many data sets now, and data analytics is such a hot topic, and incrementality, and kind of looking at your marketing from different angles.
It is about the 2026 full funnel app growth playbook. And in that playbook, that's where Adjust data underpins 2 chapters. I know because I've been working on them and have finished those, looking at retargeting and measurement, and focusing on the idea that, yes, it's not an afterthought. They are the foundation of this healthier growth we're talking about.
Yes. I mean, you said it. UA installs, they used to be king. Now still super important. You got to start somewhere, but you want your acquisition and your re-engagement to share similar signals, because if you have, you sharpen your bids for new installs, and then you have stickier cohorts, that's when your ROI is going to multiply. And I've been thinking about it. We talk about the funnel, and that the funnel, to me, obviously is still part of the story and the narrative and how to describe the situation, but funnels kind of have an endpoint. And in this, when talking about acquisition and then re-engagement and that stickiness, it's really a continuous learning loop. And so that's something that I've thought about a lot recently, and especially with seeing some of these data sets come out, and And what we're seeing in the data is that this loop is so important. The down the funnel engagement keeps that loop working.
As you said yourself, you're looking at different metrics. You're framing it entirely differently. And another thing I liked about the way you're looking at the market is you're looking at it as, what does the data deliver in the value and the experiences that users expect, and this is something that you've called the value contract, that, people are willing to share data if they understand what they're getting in return. But maybe you can unpack that for us and maybe frame that within where we are right now, which is, of course, a privacy first world. We need to respect users' data, but we're entering into a contract. That's intriguing.
I've definitely taken it on because I think it encapsulates, it's pretty simple, because I feel it even in myself that people will share data when they understand the value exchange, if they see relevance. So, I'm going to get a smoother checkout experience. I'm going to get tailored offers, faster loading, or, whatever the value exchange might be. Then we're more okay with saying, okay, sure, this kind of data is acceptable. And so I think the key here is the transparency, and marketers have to be very focused on and clear with telling their users why are we collecting this data, how it benefits them, and then of course what control they have. And that's where this value contract comes in, because at the end of the day, it's also about trust. I'm trusting you with my data, and if I trust a brand and I know that using that app and engaging frequently isn't selling my data on the black market or getting my personal data out there, then that builds the retention as well. At first, the privacy kind of went really, people were just like, oh, nothing. But then they've started to, with education and whatnot, start to learn, okay, well, I'm really still kind of more my device when it's sessions, or here's, my cart that I abandoned and things like that. That's when I can start to see the value exchange. And I think when brands are smarter about making that value exchange very transparent, then you see a shift in people's willingness to share data and basically sign that value contract.
Makes complete sense, because that's what brands are talking about. I was just at an event recently speaking, and it was all about how do we build trust? It is the understanding that transparency and trust, they are interlocked and dependent on each other. Like you said, India, Indonesia, massive markets. And that's where privacy awareness is still evolving. App usage is skyrocketing. Maybe this is moving in lockstep with that. What are you seeing?
Marketers really have this opportunity to focus on that, to lead with education and to earn that consent early and be very transparent. I think it in Indonesia, India, these emerging markets, I believe that it's a little bit more, privacy curious than some of the other markets where we were just like averse. And of course, I hope that in other markets that it also shifts to, with more education, folks understand, okay, they're more open to contextual or, or any obviously consented signals. Like I was saying earlier, session frequency, views, carts, all that kind of stuff, that isn't really about the person themselves, but about their activity in the app. And I think that this is where those kinds of markets can start to demonstrate they can deliver relevant and not invasive experiences by leveraging these contextual signs and having that value contract, signed early.
One thing that remains sort of more or less the standard across everything, I think, is retention. We're talking about it being the real story. It's not just about not finding users rather. It's about keeping them. And looking at verticals outside of gaming, it's really exciting. You know, shopping, e-commerce, that is where re-engagement is not just valuable in the contract we're discussing, but it's more valuable in some cases than the new installs. What's your take on that, and why we're talking about retention-led growth, particularly in these verticals?
Over time, economics change, and when you're trying to balance acquisition costs, and then when you're also facing stats like, day one retention is in the low teens, I think, globally, and that means users slip away after only a day, 24 hours. But it's it is shown that it's more cost effective to bring a known user back than to acquire a new one. Looking at some reattribution stats, I think installs from re-engaged users is around 2%. And then when you're talking about shopping specifically, that's kind of an interesting story in the data that we've seen with shopping apps. So there's this trend of stronger re-engagement, and then it is proven that they're more likely to convert.
It's just getting it right. This has become where, I guess you could say, in a way, smart retargeting, that starts on day one, given if you have like the right data and the right view.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes the case, for a retention-led kind of growth strategy, and
Mm-hmm.
plays into that healthy growth narrative.
So what does it take to work with so many different people, and you're bringing together those teams, because this is a team effort, thinking about what does it take today to bring users back in a way that feels relevant and not repetitive. Maybe you can give me an idea what that looks like in practice.
For me, what I've seen is when the focus is on the intent and not just frequency, then you start to get closer to the right mix for users, where it doesn't feel relentless. I think a lot of times marketers are, they have too many campaigns that are just triggered by timers, like, oh, okay, my frequency cap is this number, and whatever sticks will stick. But it's better to, when you change that mindset to looking at behaviors, create segments of behaviors. So it's kind of using those behaviors in your strategy when re-engaging those users. And of course, using deep links are super, super important. User journey is always such a big such such an important part to engaging users and keeping them.
Yeah, I'm hearing so much about that. I was just thinking of that because, we think that when we talk about re-engagement or retargeting, bringing people back in the app, who said they're going to come in the way you thought they were, right? It's about users will come the way they want. And so that makes a lot of sense to make that connection. Yeah, just to say, okay, they can come across multiple environments, web to app, right? Social, the works. How does that work in building? We are, at the end of the day, architects, experienced architects. We're bringing people back because they were familiar, they're coming back. Deep linking, and you have your own tool as well for reconnecting users. Maybe some thoughts about bringing that together. Is there probably not a playbook, but maybe a few non-negotiables, perhaps? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so deep linking, I mean, first and foremost, best practices, when re-engaging users, is you want to make sure that you can meet them, where they are. And that means having a strong user journey understanding, and then implementing the right types of linking to accommodate that. And that's where deep link comes in. At Adjust, we have our tool called TrueLink, and tools like this are critical for reconnecting users, because you have to do it, you want to do it in a seamless way, but also a privacy compliant way. And that journey continuity really matters. Because like you were saying, users don't move linearly anymore. They're going to be on social, web, app, CTV, so having a solution like TrueLink that keeps that journey intact and can function properly across those areas where you would find your users in order to re-engage them and have the ability to then land them on the correct
Exactly.
product
They want to
page.
they want to pick up where they left off. So
Exactly.
you need to be
Exactly.
flexible to do that.
Yes. And then, of course, that's what lifts conversion and trust. Trust, of course, because if they see a link and it's branded properly, with your brand, and then instead of for years we had these long links with all the parameters and everything there. And for those of us in the industry, now that I was in the industry, I'm like, okay, I know what all of that means. But the average person is just kind of like, that looks scary. I don't know if I want to click on that. So,
Or they feel point solutions a little bit disjointed,
yes,
you know? 'Cause,
exactly.
I mean, deep links are not new, but the way of building these journeys, I think, is very
Yeah.
new. Another
Yes.
thing we have that is new, and we talk about it at length in chapter 4, which is all about data. Yes, that's what Adjust brought. Lots of insights, lots of data. So yes, appreciate that. But let's face it, we've moved from real-time reporting to delayed deterministic signals. And so, every post back becomes something more. It becomes like a decision point. What about from your perspective? How can marketers turn this new reality of what seems to be sort of delayed into an advantage? Scan readiness, the ability to act on signals even when they are delayed. How does that happen to build confidence in a team?
Back when Scan really came out, I was working a slightly different position at Adjust. I was still a technical account manager, so I was working directly with clients, trying to. And I remember from day one, I said, "Wow, this looks really interesting." I'm going to dive in to make sure that I can, consult with my clients and help them feel ready. And oh boy, that journey. And over all of this time, I've stayed in touch with Scan. I've even in the different roles that I've had. And it still comes back to exactly what you said. At the end of the day, we have to deal with it,
Have to deal with
and
it. But at
there,
least we're not always
there
alone,
are,
in a sense,
oh,
right? Because
exactly.
we are getting a little bit of help. I mean, even I'm not a marketer, but I can see where it comes in to deal with the data and change the way we look at growth and measurement. What's
Yeah.
happening with Adjust? How are you taking that idea further? We have AI assistants.
Yeah. So I think, going back to your point, like each post back is a decision point. What I always consulted with my clients on, and still to this day, is to the way to be ready and handle Scan the best is to set aside your expectations of our normal world, and look at it, with a fresh perspective. Yes, it can be delayed. Yes, it can be limited, but there's still data and information there. And if you set it up in a smart way with the conversion values, and you have defined your thresholds, your how you're going to test different creatives or budgets, or if you have a framework for that for yourself, then I have seen clients be much more successful and not feel like they're pulling out their hair, and just waiting for data. They say, okay, well, these are my trigger points, these are my thresholds, these are the specific, KPIs that I'm looking for. And yeah, it's not in a perfect world, it's not all the data that I want, but this is something that I can feel at least confident about when making a decision. I think that will continue to improve our ability to create action out of Scan data, um, because it will help to take some of the guessing out, because the sophisticated tool is just faster at spotting patterns and building summaries and things like that. And so hopefully we'll see a little bit more confidence come out of layering on top of the data that is there, and despite it being delayed, that we can build confidence in a wider group of advertisers, that now they've got some actionable data points to work off of with Scan.
And that comes a little bit back to what we were discussing at the very start, some calm, some clarity, bringing that in. Yes, it is complex data, absolutely, but you can get clear and actionable insights. And I don't want to plug it necessarily, but I am intrigued. I want to understand, and I think our audience would like to understand a little bit about how the vision of AI fits in with what you're doing, because you have Growth Copilot. How does that work? Where does that fit in trying to use automation more confidently?
Yeah. So at Adjust, we've been building out our Growth Copilot, which is basically our AI Copilot, our tool that builds onto our. It kind of started out connected to Datascape, which is our analytics tool, where you can analyze all of your data, and we're looking into other ways of how it can be incorporated into our tool and other areas, but it's mainly was about how can we have something AI driven that assists marketers to turning complex data into clear, actionable insights, whether that be Scan or anything else. I mean, determining retargeting segments, using, like I was saying earlier, with my wish list was abandoned, or I created a wish list, or my cart was abandoned, or these behavioral signals that we have in our systems, because we're tracking those events or sessions, and you can ask it in plain English or plain language. It's what creatives improved my return on ad spend last week, what summarize my Scan results, and hopefully the idea is that it's a partner. It's not meant to be a black box. It's meant to help our marketers make faster, smarter decisions.
And see
So
those
yeah,
patterns as well, because that's what's
exactly.
emerging. I mean, the,
Yep.
the data points are saying a lot. It's saying a lot about behavior, and then to be able to step back or to step into it through AI and just frame that differently. And particularly in e-commerce, that is where the data that you have really starts to point to some trends. And I want to stay with e-commerce for a moment, because you've just done your growth report looking at exactly that. Gaming and e-commerce, they're starting to overlap. Isn't that exciting? So we have brands using in-game ads to reach audiences. We've got games going transmedia, mass media. Looking at that trend, why do you think that is, or rather, what can marketers learn from this crossover between entertainment and commerce and the data that's overlapping there? Maybe we're seeing some new and different behavior signals we need to pay more attention to.
And I think it's just taking uh, the understanding that when someone is playing a game, players are highly engaged, and then they create communities, and they're part of environments that are immersive, and for shopping, e-commerce type businesses, using that understanding and methodology to make an experience more engaging, more fun, make them feel like they're part of a community. I mean, you even said, some of the retargeting and Mina, people were saying like, "Oh, I'm the star," I'm important. And I think, that is a part of it. And it also goes a little bit back to just understanding users better, and it ties a little with the user journey. You're meeting audiences where they are already, so they're already engaged and playing games and wanting to be part of communities, and recreating that in these other environments can, lead to more more retention and more engagement in in an e-commerce app, for example.
And we'll just take that and play with that for a moment because we're talking about retargeting and reading from the behavioral signals because that's going to give us richer retargeting. We're going to see different types of, maybe the word is segmentation, maybe not. It's probably something deeper than that, borderline persona, where certain behaviors are telling me more things about, yes, this is the audience to retarget. This might be the one to leave entirely on the wayside. You don't want to retarget everyone. Um, just curious because there you are in data, bringing some clarity and some calm to our data. Are we going to get excited about new ways to look at the data, new ways to segment our users, new ways to maybe approach retargeting because we're going to be seeing more at different stages in our funnel, or not even our funnel, our learning loop, as it were. So it feels as if, yes, it's really hard to do, but we're going to have a little bit more to work with.
Yeah, I think as we change a little these mindsets and approaches, and having a little bit more of a focus on retention and the user experience and engagement within the app, I and thinking about it, that loop, that engagement loop, and how each element along the funnel impacts the user's engagement, I think we will see a little bit of expansion and more play and testing with those behavioral signals, and then of course with AI being able to more quickly and assist marketers in order to analyze, oh, okay, I tried a segment based on this type of behavioral signal. Now I'm going to try a segment based on this other signal, and then be able to compare, or even to see, what was there an incremental effect based on re-engaging this type of segment, that the segment that created a wish list versus the segment that put something in the cart and abandoned it. What is that? How does that look different? And what does it look like to re-engage those? And what is the impact? We might not only play with the ads, but also play within the data sets to see what different segments are effective in different ways.
And hopefully also bring those two closer together because I think one of the big challenges in the year ahead is going to be figuring out, okay, I know who I want to retarget. Now, how am I going to do that? Those ads need to look different. They need to be picking up where someone left off. You don't go in and reintroduce everything. You don't need to tell me all about the game I used to play the game. You don't need to tell me all about the e-commerce shop I bought there already. So that's going to be very interesting. So a lot to discuss and to move forward, a lot more data that we need to digest and frame differently. But before we wrap up with that and maybe look forward to a very data rich future, I mean, things are changing. So do the metrics, so do the formulas, so do the algorithms. We have to see things in a much richer way because it's very complex. But you, as I said at the beginning, you have made your career around making complexity actionable. What was maybe a turning point, a moment when you realized how simplifying things could be the equivalent of a superpower? Because again, our audience listening in, I want to get them excited about the idea that stepping back or, seeing it differently is a good thing. So when did you notice it could be your superpower, and is it?
Yeah, I honestly, it's always the biggest compliment to me when someone tells me I've made something that's super complex for them simple. I've that's brings me so much joy.
I love it.
And because I love teaching, and since I love to feel that aha moment where something clicks, I love to bring that to others. I have to break it down for my own understanding, and it seems that when I teach it to people that way, it also works for them. And I just, so it's an honor for me to help people and to teach them. And And I don't know, is something that you get the most joy out of also your superpower? I mean, maybe.
That's great when you can have
So
them both. So
yes,
very good
exactly.
for you, Nicoline.
Yeah,
You're in the right place and in the right way. And that's what I want to have. I want to have some feeling in the teams because they're going to have to start explaining this. It's not going to get easier, but what has to get easier is, I think, the way we explain it, we relate to it, and we understand the lessons that we have. So yeah, it sparks joy with you and hopefully with the teams out there. And getting to
absolutely.
teams, that was my next question, because again, you work with teams the way it's supposed to be. There's product, there's marketing, they're vast and they're multidisciplined and have to be
Yep.
that way in the future. That is the new reality. What
Yes.
is a lesson that you've learned, maybe the biggest lesson you've learned from,
Yep.
leading teams, bridging product, engineering, and commercial worlds?
Yeah, the biggest thing I've learned is it can be very daunting and overwhelming to hold a position where you're trying to be the connective tissue between all of those teams. But when you get it right, when you're working on a project where you have all of those teams and all of those worlds working together in lockstep, it is such a beautiful experience and so much more proficient and efficient, and you get stronger results. And so I encourage everyone to make sure that those teams are communicating and sharing perspectives and experiences together, because in their own right, I always joke with my colleagues sometimes when they do something and finish something that, of course, to them is that's just their day to day, but to me, it's magical because I don't know how to do that. And so I always try to encourage, people and their superpowers and their magical powers, and bring them to the table. And I think that connection, that conversation, that collaboration is so valuable and impactful. And I see so much innovation and creativity come out of when we bring when you have people who can bring those teams together and create an understanding. And so yeah, that's the biggest thing I've learned, is that
We've gone from algorithms to analogies and understanding how all of that works together. I have to say, yes, you are consistent with what I thought at the beginning, calm and complexity. And now I know that it even sparks joy in your life. So I know that this is more than a job, which is great, because we should enjoy what we do and we should enjoy what's ahead, because it isn't going to be easy, but
no.
nothing easy is ever worth it to begin with, right?
Yeah. And I'm just, the thing that always calms me, and maybe I said this in the beginning, is just you're not alone. You hopefully have colleagues and smart teams and smart partners and clients who will always, pick their brains when you're nervous about something or confused about something, because you never know what you're gonna learn. And it's really that is a joyful part of my job.
Segue to mine, because I love teaching in my own way. That's why I've dedicated time to this podcast series, other work, and also, of course, getting back to it simply because I love the fact that it's so straightforward, is the 2026 Full Funnel App Growth Series, which is not only about teaching marketers, but it's about, giving everybody a bit of a new blueprint, a bit of a new look, because it is about full funnel growth. And in many ways, for many people, that's something new. That's something they have to master. So just want to thank you for your time here and for all the great data that it just has given me.
Oh
Um,
yes.
and
This was fabulous.
Right,
Thank you so much.
absolutely. Great to have you, and looking forward to having you back at some point. I have to say, Nicolina, it's a joy when someone really enjoys teaching and helping. And thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
And of course, for everybody else, if you want to dive deeper into the insights we've discussed today, I'm sure Nicolina wouldn't mind if you reached out to her. But in addition, you can also check out the Full Funnel Growth Playbook and subscribe, share, stay tuned, because we continue in this series to explore how marketers are turning privacy, performance, and creativity into the ultimate growth advantage. Stay tuned.